Good evening. Welcome to Ithaca's Green New Deal, a Zoom presentation of local energy advocates of Western Massachusetts. We're so excited to be joined by folks from our local area as well as from all around the state to hear about Ithaca's groundbreaking decarbonization plan. My name is Darcy Dumont, and I'm a member of the board of Local Energy Advocates. Next slide, please. Thank you. We would like to thank this evening's endorsers: Climate Action Now, Mothers Out Front, Amherst and Northampton chapters, Massachusetts Climate Action Network, and Grow Food Northampton. Next. Oh, that's the correct slide. Thank you. I'm going to take just a moment now to tell you about our host tonight, Local Energy Advocates of Western Mass. LEA was created in 2021 to generate ideas and accelerate the implementation of plans to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the energy sectors in Western Massachusetts, to increase the resiliency of our local energy systems, and to support the upcoming joint intermunicipal electricity aggregation. That includes supporting many kinds of projects similar to those being planned by Ithaca. Local Energy Advocates places a high priority on projects that promote environmental justice, and it intends to raise funds and engage in partnerships in order to accomplish our goals. The founders of LEA were among the initiators of the upcoming joint intermunicipal electricity aggregation among Northampton, Amherst, and Pelham, which will prioritize reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Membership in LEA is open. To join or make a donation to LEA, just go to our website, localenergyadvocates.org. Here's a quick agenda for the evening Zoom. We'll hear from our speakers for about 20 minutes each, and then open to questions. Ariel needs to leave at, Ariel is not leaving at 8, so we'll be taking questions for all three presenters, and we expect to close at about 8:30. Now, moving on to the main event. Our first speaker will be Dr. Luis Aguirre-Torres, Ithaca Sustainability Director and creator of Ithaca's groundbreaking efficiency retrofitting and thermal load electrification program. Prior to joining the city of Ithaca, Dr. Aguirre-Torres spent 12 years assisting Latin American countries develop innovation and climate change legislation, and providing technical assistance for long-term climate change and climate justice projects. He's the founder of Green Momentum, a market intelligence and innovation firm focused on climate change and clean technology, as well as Clean Tech Challenge and Clean Tech Labs, the largest clean tech and hard tech business incubators in Latin America. Since 2010, he led an ambitious climate justice program in Latin America, for which he was recognized as Champion of Change by President Obama in 2012. He holds a degree in computer engineering, a master's degree in computer science, and a PhD in electrical and electronic engineering from University College London. Our second speaker will be Ariel Kalishman-Walsh, Director of Enterprise Partnerships at BlocPower LLC. BlocPower was chosen as project manager for the Ithaca program. It's a Brooklyn-based climate technology company rapidly greening American cities. Since its founding in 2014, the company has completed energy projects in over 1,200 buildings and delivers results ahead of schedule and under budget. The company is backed by some of the world's top investors. Claire Doyle-Dowd, BlocPower Director of Policy and Community, will also be assisting to answer questions. Now, without further ado, Luis, please unmute and begin your presentation. And Rose, who is also on the LEA board, will be the timekeeper.
Thank you very much. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate this opportunity to share with you everything that we're trying to do in the city of Ithaca. I have some slides, but before I start, I just want to say that what we're trying to do, both you and us here in Ithaca, it's very difficult. We're to do something that nobody has attempted before. And there is a need to think about it in a very different way. New type of partnerships need to be created. We need to look at finance in a completely different way. We need to look at technology in a way that benefits people and not just innovate for the sake of innovation. So a lot of what we're trying to do is innovative, but for the same reason, in all likelihood, it's not perfect. So there are things that are going to work, some things are not going to work. So this type of engagement, this type of communication is really helpful because you're going to ask questions, and likely one of those questions is going to be the question that probably changes things for the better. So please don't be shy. And also when I present, I tend to speak very fast. I have an accent. So just interrupt me, scream really loud, do whatever you need to do to stop me, and I'll be very happy to start from the beginning or repeat things. And if not, well, that'll be fun too. So I'm going to start sharing my screen, and I just need, I don't know, somebody to give me thumbs up saying that, you can see this. Perfect. So once again, my name is Luis. I'm the Director of Sustainability for the City of Ithaca. When you work in sustainability, the one thing that we need to be conscious of is that we're doing this for people. We're doing this so people can have a better life. And also, for a really long time, the environmental movement was thinking about, leaving the world in a better shape than the way we found it. But the reality is that the modern environmental movement is really like life before death. So it is all about us enjoying this. There is a sense of urgency for making things happen tomorrow. So this is part of what we're trying to do. In the city of Ithaca, it all started about 3 years ago when, it all started in Washington. Senator Markey and Representative Ocasio-Cortez came up with a Green New Deal, and it started a massive movement all over the country. The Sunrise Movement basically took the reins in the city of Ithaca and did a bunch of sit-ins in front of the mayor's office and convinced him that the city needed to make a stand. It needed to take action against climate change. And of course, you have to take action against climate change. If you're paying attention to everything that is happening, you really need to start, doing something. And it all comes from, from Paris. We went to Paris, the United States went to Paris with a lot of ambition. And then there was a pledge, and then we came back and we had to negotiate with a president that didn't like it. And then we had to take it to Congress. And eventually very little happened. So now, it is for us, society, citizens, small communities, to take control of this fight. And, that's what the city of Ithaca tried to do. But the problem was that COVID hit immediately. We couldn't really do much. And then 2 years later, in March last year, they hired some dude, that is me, to come up with an idea on how to actually implement this thing. So when I came on board, it was fantastic, because the first thing that happened was I talked to the mayor, and the mayor told me, well, we have a plan to decarbonize the city by 2030. And I was like, what is the plan? And he was like, well, this piece of paper, what you are looking at on the screen, that was the plan. So it was awesome because, I had no choice but to laugh, very loud, and then cry when I was alone at home, because I had no idea what I was getting into. Imagine what it is to decarbonize an entire city, not in 10 years, in 8 years. But you know what? I think it is possible. I'm an optimist, it's pathological, but the truth is that I believe we can do it. But we need to get real. We need to think about what is it that we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is, reduce carbon emissions, because that's what you have to do, right? So, but we need to think about it also in terms of energy intensity. We need to reduce the amount of energy that we consume per GDP unit, but we also need to look at carbon intensity in energy. So this is what we have to do. It's an oversimplification, and I'm using a graph to make it sound more sophisticated, but the truth is that this is what we have to do. It's very simple. But now, we are in the state of New York, and that is cool, because the state of New York is actually trying to, compete with California. I am very sure that the two governors, have a bet going on or something, because they're trying to do better, every time. And they're calling each other like, dude, I have this plan, you don't have it. And then he calls back and tells the governor in New York that we have something better. But the truth is that this is helping, because in the State of the State address in January, the governor basically committed to do things that this state had never even thought that it would be possible. Specifically, the governor committed to reduce 185 trillion BTU of end-use energy. That is like replacing 530 billion of light bulbs. It's just a crazy thing to try to do. But, if we don't shoot for the stars, then we're not being realistic. So the city of Ithaca is realistic. We're shooting for the stars. We did some analysis, and we figured that we have 400,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent going on in the atmosphere. That is like 100,000 vehicles going at it, outside your house. That's the number of emissions that we have. But, we're a simple economy. So we can really identify the sources of emissions. 40% of our emissions come from buildings. And of that, a chunk of them come from energy use inside buildings for space heating. Some of it comes from water heating and other uses, but that's where things are. And then transportation, 40%. Passenger vehicles, heavy duty, off-road vehicles, but it's a chunk of the emissions. Then the grid, our electric grid in the case of New York is not that bad. At least where we are, we get about 80% carbon-free electricity. And then there is 5% that comes from waste, etc. But here comes the fun part. Try to sell a very aggressive strategy to transform the economy, to transform infrastructure at the same time that you're considering equity and climate justice to the city leaders, who have to eventually explain to everybody who voted for them that this is what we're doing. So we needed to really simplify things even further. So we started talking, okay, we're just talking about energy efficiency. We're talking about decarbonizing the electric grid, and we're talking about electrifying everything that we can electrify. And then, we're going to have to do some carbon capture and sequestration. The way we think about it is, if we do energy efficiency across all aspects of the economy, we can reduce 30% of the emissions. Think about it. If we do things just more efficiently, and it goes on everything. It goes to like the way we use vehicles, the way we use water, the way we use electricity. And if we were to electrify everything that can be electrified, and this is interesting, right? Because I think in the planet, the energy stock, only about 65% can be electrified. For the rest, because of energy flow or energy density, it's going to be very difficult. So we need low carbon fuels. But in the city of Ithaca, at least, we have about 85% of the energy use can be electrified. And that would lead to a reduction of 30% of the emissions. So if we were to decarbonize the grid, and make sure that all our electricity comes from carbon-free sources, then we can reduce another 20%. And then we're 80%, close to our objective. Then, it's about technologies that still need to mature, need to be better and cheaper and more affordable. But once they are, then we have a plan, It's an oversimplification, perhaps, but dude, you need to start with a plan. Otherwise, you're never going to do anything. So then how do we put these, in terms that people who are not involved in climate change or energy can actually understand and follow? So, okay, so we're talking about energy efficiency. We're talking about these. We're talking about our homes being thermally efficient, cool during summer, warm during winter, but in general, it means that they're better built. And we need to look at these houses because in our case, and I think in yours, it must be even worse, in our case, we have homes that are 200 years old, 150 years old, and these are very difficult to retrofit. Then we need to think about circular economy. We need to think about, instead of thinking about waste, we need to think about materials and resource materials recovery, right? We need to think about it in a very different way. And we need to get people to stop riding single passenger vehicles and start using transit or bikes. And then when we talk about electrification, we need to start thinking about, okay, I'm going to take space heating systems, water heating systems, and I'm going to replace them with heat pumps. And it's super cool to cook with natural gas or propane. But the truth is that, you are inhaling all of that. Air quality, if you do that at home, is not going to be great. So we can also replace those with induction range. And then, the way you dry our clothes, we can do it with an electric dryer. And here is where the discovery begins. Because if you start thinking about the benefits of co-deploying all of these, then you can see that if you were to deploy a heat pump for drying your clothes, the type of electrical infrastructure that you need at home, it is exactly the same one that you need for an EV charging station. So wow, suddenly we're finding these economic benefits of co-deploying all of these technologies. Because then if we look at solar co-deployed at the same time that we put heat pumps out there, then we start thinking, okay, that way we are reducing the dependency that we have from the grid. So it becomes really interesting because we were thinking about buildings being 40% of the emissions in the city. But when you start thinking about these, and probably we can put rooftop solar and we can use energy storage, then you think buildings alone, addressing these with buildings can take us 50% to where we need to go. But then if we start taking this more seriously and we start thinking, okay, we can electrify transit, we can electrify refuse trucks, we can really take on all that is very difficult to electrify. And then, we wait for some direct air capture technologies. But then, we have, for example, in the wastewater treatment plant, we have a way of through biomass gasification, capturing, sequestering carbon and producing biochar. And you know what? In the process, we can actually produce hydrogen. We have a project right now going on where we're doing that. We're actually taking advantage of the organic waste that we have, and we're producing biochar and hydrogen. But here's the thing, it's difficult to do this if we don't think about it in terms of equity. We need to think about everybody who needs to benefit from these activities, because we're doing it for the people. So at the end of the day, we need a climate justice program. In the city of Ithaca, we have something we call Justice 50, which means that 50% of the benefits need to be redirected to disadvantaged communities. And we're talking about 50%. And the best way of looking at it is we're going to be retrofitting and electrifying every single building in the city. But now think about, we are never going to be able to be working on a moderate income building if we are not already working in a low income building. That's the way you keep things fair. It's going to be hard. It's going to be expensive, but it's the right thing to do. We need to have a plan. We have a climate action plan that actually serves as a climate risk disclosure, which, I'm going to let you in a secret. If you do that, you can actually bond and borrow money for much less. So, just so you know. Anyway, we are also redefining the way we engage with the community. We are not doing consultations anymore. We are doing democratic engagement of the community. We are coming up with solutions. We're implementing solutions, and we are hopeful that we're going to have a participatory budget that will help us implement solutions that the community can create, manage, and implement themselves. We're addressing workforce development because, oh God, this is hard, Think about everything that needs to happen. Every single building in the city is going to have something different in 10 years. So what that means is that somebody had to do that. And then we're going to create so much waste. We're going to have, all of these materials to recycle, to reuse, to identify, and then see if we can have a secondary market or a new life for some of these things. So, workforce development is going to be such an important issue in this strategy to decarbonize the entire country. And then our cities, if you think about it, summer is difficult because, we have, these high peaks because of air conditioning. But during winter, now that everything is electric, in the city of Ithaca, we did some modeling and we are estimating that we're going to triple the summer load. That is, we're going to use during winter 3 times the amount of electricity that we use during summer. And this is going to be hard. So investments need to happen in the distribution grid. And we're working with the federal government and with the utility company to make that happen, because our city is going to look very different. It's going to be a virtual power plant by 2030. So there are many ways in which we can do this. And one of them is obviously not doing anything. The other one is doing, 25% of the plan, that's going to cost us about, probably $400,000, $400 million. But, we're going to touch on some buildings and we're going to install some solar. But what if we were to go for at least 3/4 of the city? And if we were to do that, it's going to be a bit more expensive. It's going to be, probably $1 billion. But at the end of the day, we're going to be reducing at least 50% of the emissions. But if we want to reduce 75% of the emissions, we need to get real. We need to think about every single building. We need to think about every single vehicle. We need to think about the electric grid. Because at the end, once the technology becomes available, it's going to be under $2 billion that is going to cost for us to do this. The dream, the Ithaca Green New Deal, a city fully decarbonized by 2030 may cost just under $2 billion. But here's the secret. It's not for the community. It's not for the government to pay. There is a ton of money out there. So we need to create the mechanisms in which we can access that capital. Because what we want is to have every single building being carbon neutral. We need to address design. We need to address construction. We need to address performance. We need to do this with policy, energy codes, deconstruction ordinances, but we also need to think about the future. So we are hoping to release in January next year the first energy building performance standard for the city. And what that means is we're going to make sure that everybody has a way of phasing out emissions from energy use inside buildings to the point that by 2030, no new building, no existing building has emissions coming from energy. And the question that everybody has is, how do you get people to buy into this, right? I mean, how do you get the community to buy into what we're trying to do? It's really hard. But we can think about it in the same way we think about technology. How is it that, technology propagates? So, there are theories, and we're actually relying on that. So thinking about it in that way, we think that 34% of the population of the city of Ithaca actually fall on the other side of the political spectrum. They don't believe in climate change. There's no way we're going to convince them. So we're not going to bother because, it's a waste of time and a waste of money. But, we have about 15% that already own Teslas, that are already doing this. So, that's my low hanging fruit. Actually, that is my field of dreams. We're going to have them come in because we have something to offer. Then it gets interesting because my project becomes really efficient because it's targeting just 50% of the population. But then you think about it and it's like, well, the state is offering incentives that are so compelling for the low income bracket that we really need to focus on 30% of the population. And that's why this could work, because it's a very efficient, targeted approach to get 30% of the population to buy into this program. And that's the nudge. From a behavioral economics point of view, that is the nudge that will get the whole city to turn. And once I have critical mass, you know what I can do with policy? I can claim that a part of the city are disproportionately harming others by producing emissions from energy use. And then I can legislate the hell out of them. And then I can get them to change what they're doing so we can really decarbonize the entire city. This is hard. I started saying this at the beginning. We need a ton of money. Considering single family and multifamily buildings, the average cost for retrofit and electrification is going to be like $50,000. And who has that money, right? I don't think my house is worth that much. And for commercial buildings, it's around $70,000. But we need to find a way of making it happen. I'm going to give you a preview of what's coming, but, you really partner with BlocPower and they make it happen. Economically, it's hard. Not everything works. At times you're going to have a propane or a fuel oil building, and then the numbers are going to work. But then if you have natural gas, the numbers are not going to work. So you need to figure out how to balance this, how to create bundles of buildings where you can actually balance costs in a way that it works for everybody. You need to work, think about the infrastructure and how the distribution grid needs to change and evolve. And you need to think about workforce, because this number, 400,000 workers we need, is for the first part of the project. We need like 3,000 people. In a city of 30,000, we need 3,000 people to come and do the work. So we need to partner with neighboring cities. And we already did that. We created the Green Jobs Corridor that is connecting 5 cities in New York in 3 economic regions, because all of them have unemployed, underemployed people, and we have a market. We have something to offer. So, we're working with the state to create like learning on the job programs where people will get paid to learn and eventually go back to their communities and be the foundational element of a new workforce development program. Another graph, and I promise you it's the last one, but what we have is, okay, there is people that have money and people that don't. And normally, if we're thinking conventionally about money, we can aspire, if we're lucky, to 4% interest rates. But what if we were to implement risk mitigating measures? What if we were to think about this the way we think about climate change as a giant risk mitigation strategy? And we find ways of providing financial inclusion. We have a whole city to create a very diversified portfolio of buildings, therefore reducing risk. What if we were to back this program by the government for 20 years? Long-term certainty that this is going to happen. We codify this in law, and we make sure that no matter who the mayor is, no matter who the city council is, this program continues. Then you rely on municipal building, and then you provide long-term lending and leasing options. That reduces risk in a way that allows you to bring interest rates down. And then if you rely on all the state incentives, federal incentives, and rebates, and you apply that money to the same pool of money that you had to pay for this, you already collected the money that the investors were expecting in return. So man, suddenly you have 3% interest rate. But then—
Luis, I'm just letting you know, you're getting to about 5 minutes more.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. So suddenly, like in the city, we thought, okay, what we need to do is to make sure that everybody can participate, because we thought about this as we're going to take 6,000 buildings and we're going to retrofit and electrify them. What we're going to do is rely on private capital because, these guys can put the money and the state can supplement that money. And we also thought about creating the Ithaca Electrification Fund from philanthropic contributions that could cover the interest rates for anybody who's left of the median income. But then, you need to worry about making sure that everybody has access to this. You need to make sure that everybody can participate. So all of these components need to come together. There are so many moving parts, but you know what? It is possible. We've been working on all of these moving parts and we are connecting them. We created such a constellation of partners that at this point I can tell you, I think we can make this happen, but it's hard to make it happen on your own. You need to rely on people who have done this in the past, people who understand technology, who understand finance, who understand community, who understand the sense of urgency, who know how we need to do this to make it happen and make it possible. So the city of Ithaca didn't set out to decarbonize every building, didn't set out to be the first carbon neutral city. What we set out to do is to identify a blueprint for decarbonization in the United States. And the expectation is to share everything. When we are right, when we are wrong, what we learn, what we discover, everything has to be shared with everybody because we're in this together. We need to make this happen together. And we chose BlocPower to lead the charge, because we needed somebody with experience and also with the understanding that not even BlocPower can do it alone. There needs to be a series of partnerships. There's about 57 organizations that are part of what we're trying to do in Ithaca, and we are working in concert. It's just a beautiful experiment on how we can make something really hard happen, and I always think about it this way. When Kennedy said in 1962, we're going to make it to the moon, it doesn't matter if we made it to the moon. What happened right after is just a beautiful change. It's like suddenly we were working together, new partnerships, new procurement systems, everything became more efficient. So what really happened is we changed the way we work together and we made it to the moon. Same thing with the vaccine. We changed the way we work together so we could distribute vaccines to 7 billion people. So right now, this is what we're trying to do. Find new ways of working together. This is a mission-oriented, collaborative approach to carbon neutrality so we can elevate social capital and make sure that everybody can share on this sustainable prosperity that will come if we are successful. And with that, I'm going to stop, but I want to thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Luis. We are going to move right on to Ariel Kalishman-Walsh.
Thanks, Darcy. And gosh, I do not want to have to follow Luis on another presentation. He is so fantastic. I wish I could invite him to take my deck over. I'm sure you guys would enjoy that as well. Thanks so much for having us tonight. Claire and I are really thrilled to be here. It's an honor to speak to you all and everyone here in the audience about BlocPower's work with local communities and our efforts in Ithaca. Let me get my screen up and get started. I know that we don't have a ton of time tonight, so I want to make sure we're moving forward. Can you see my screen? Great. Thanks. So I want to start off, normally I start off talking about BlocPower, but I want to talk about BlocPower in Ithaca and the Electrify Ithaca program. I won't go through all the details here because we just heard such a great presentation from Luis about the two-phase program to, well, the Ithaca Green New Deal, which is much larger than just the Electrify Ithaca program, but the Electrify Ithaca program, which will decarbonize 6,000 buildings in 2 phases. I just want to take a moment and note what an enormous deal it is that Ithaca made this commitment, the first of its kind, showing this political will that's really necessary to address climate change. The leadership of the city, including, of course, Luis and the vision of the Common Council, the mayor, and the drivers of all of this, the citizens of Ithaca, what they've shown is really remarkable. And we also know that there's a number of other cities and communities out there who are ready to make similar efforts and take similar risks, especially in Massachusetts. We also know that cities, which have a lot more flexibility than the federal government, are the ones that must lead on climate. So we're really excited to talk to everyone here today. BlocPower is going to partner with the city to bring together the resources needed to make the Electrify Ithaca portion of the Ithaca Green New Deal possible. We're going to bring our turnkey approach that partners us with contractors, community-based organizations for workforce development, and others. We're also going to bring capital to be used in our lease, which I'll talk about later, and as well as our expertise in scaled retrofit programs. We're going to work with Ithaca to address emissions, create jobs, and make it all affordable and accessible using scale to keep costs and risk low. BlocPower's mission is to make buildings smarter, greener, healthier, and more profitable. We do this by reducing fossil fuel consumption and pollution in building energy systems. A little bit about BlocPower. We're a Black-owned climate tech company that was founded in 2014. We're focused on greening and modernizing residential and small commercial buildings, and we have over 1,200 projects completed to date. We develop, implement, and finance energy efficiency and electrification projects. To complement our focus on electrification, we have software to bring these benefits to low-income communities. We offer a lease that means customers can get energy savings improvements at no upfront cost. We have an equity lens that also led us to offer community mesh Wi-Fi programs and dedicated workforce development programs. Our partners in our work include utilities, government organizations, and private capital providers. We found success in electrification because there is so much work out there to do, and we've been willing to roll up our sleeves and experiment and take some risks. A little bit about US buildings. They're inefficient and unhealthy. You probably know a lot of this. They're inefficient, they cost a lot to operate, they're less comfortable, they waste an enormous amount of energy. Only 8% of all US buildings currently use air source heat pump for space heating. The pandemic has also shined a light on the health issues that outdated building equipment can cause through lower indoor air quality. Because of that, it's really important that building efficiency and electrification retrofits don't start with the wealthy. I think we saw Luis's fantastic adoption curve, which provides a lot of inspiration, knowing there's the low-hanging fruit and there's the people who will be compelled to change through legislation. We have a slightly different take on it as well. While a typical adoption curve provides benefits to the people who are willing to and able to take risks on early technology, BlocPower looks to shift the model into more of an LMI first adoption spiral, low and moderate income first adoption spiral. We specifically aim our programs to deliver benefits towards historically excluded communities. This is a break from the typical adoption curve so that the benefits can be accrued to those who need them most as early as possible. What are the solutions that we focus on primarily? Electric buildings is our focus at BlocPower. We focus on all electric buildings powered by clean energy. These solutions address health impacts, they address barriers to equity, they reduce risk from climate change, they create jobs, and we're able to work with a range of federal, state, and local policies and programs to capture incentives and lower project costs. It's a lot to look at, and something else gets in the way of capturing all of these benefits: the individual project complexity. I'm guessing that there are some people on this call and on this presentation who have experience with building electrification and probably can speak to the complexity of completing a building decarbonization project. There's a lot of fragmented players. There can be 6 to 12 players that an individual property owner needs to deal with in order to complete a building decarbonization project, should they be educated on the available technologies and committed to the issue. They would have to coordinate parties like the government incentive provider and permit issuer, the utility incentive provider, the engineering design necessary, construction contractor, the lender in order to capture, secure financing, and then also to secure equipment purchasing. That's assuming that you can find stakeholders in all of these areas who are committed to building decarbonization as well. It takes a lot of time, it is very fragmented, and it adds unnecessary costs, reducing the profitability of these projects and reducing the ability for property owners to engage in them. So what BlocPower does is deliver a one-stop shop solution for building owners by working with local partners in markets where we're engaged. The solution allows us to simplify the process for a building owner by acting as a central point of contact. We have proprietary software solutions that help us manage the projects and reduce upfront project design costs. And we have simplified financing, which is a benefit to the property owner by keeping it in-house, and it allows us to eliminate upfront costs and structures our payments to match projected savings. A little bit more about our lease. Our lease covers the building analysis and energy savings plan, the installations of our energy savings equipment, a low-cost preventative maintenance of the leased equipment with 2 times a year maintenance included, real-time equipment monitoring through our Internet of Things enabled devices that are installed with our equipment, and equipment remote controls. The benefits include no money down, which means we pay for your upfront heat pump and clean energy equipment installation, low predictable monthly payments, don't vary based on energy costs, a 15-year performance guarantee, regular maintenance included, and crucially, as an equitable issue, we have no lien on the building. In some communities where residential PACE is available, this has been a predatory offer that has caused some people to even lose their homes. And that's not something that BlocPower is interested in. So we don't add debt to the property owner's balance sheet. We have a 15-year lease, which can be transferred with ownership of the home. Our lease can cover many different types of technologies. While air source heat pumps for space heating are our specialty, technologies have to go beyond heat pumps to meet the needs of individual building owners and to fully decarbonize entire cities like Ithaca. So when transitioning off of fossil fuels, obviously energy efficiency measures are really necessary. We want to make sure that we're sealing homes, providing insulation, and right-sizing the equipment so that we're not energizing space heating and heating the surrounding communities. We also encourage property owners to use solar or engage enroll in community solar subscriptions to help control electricity costs post decarbonization. And decarbonization also means the inclusion of induction stoves, which provide improved indoor air quality, electric vehicle charging, and battery storage as well. It depends on the needs and requirements and desires of a property owner. We partner with a range of local companies to help meet this range of technology needs. And we meet the needs of any individual property owner based on their budget and desires. How do we scale from individual property projects to full-scale programs like the ones in Ithaca? First, we take lessons from the last time, or one of the first times BlocPower did this, at Community Retrofit NYC, which was our first large-scale efficiency and electrification program in New York City, which is where BlocPower was founded. BlocPower partnered with Con Ed and the Mayor's Office of New York City to manage a 500 building project to reduce peak demand in a particular area of Brooklyn. We completed the project under budget and a year ahead of schedule. We used utility data and sensor data to recommend equipment upgrades and replacements. And we connected property owners to top contractors in the area, who we also provided trainings to in order to enable them to understand the equipment that they were installing if it was novel to them. We also developed the Community Advisory Board model. This is where BlocPower works to build a community advisory board of local community leaders to build trust and drive referrals to our programs, knowing that in disinvested communities, trust for programs from cities and utilities is often very low for good reason. And finding champions within the community to speak to the trust that they can have with BlocPower is very helpful in speeding up the flywheel effect of adoption for these programs. A little bit more about how BlocPower works with communities and our Community Advisory Board, which launched with the Community Retrofit NYC. In Ithaca, one of the first things we're doing is forming a local Community Advisory Board, like we do when we enter new markets. We're working with Luis and his team to speak to local community members, hear their thoughts on the program and their concerns, who they trust and don't trust in the community. So far, we've spoken with almost 100 people. The tour has helped us start to envision what the community advisory board will ultimately look like. It will involve planning meetings, partnering on events, referrals, providing direct and indirect introductions. When we start outreach, we'll need a range of solutions to enable our program as well. One of those includes our proprietary software. We have data analytics and city scale software that allows us to provide city leaders and program managers like ourselves or others to look at buildings at scale and understand the mix of technologies that will be needed and how to prioritize the properties first in need of retrofits and the ones that will be better to look at in 5 or 10 years down the road. Maybe they recently received a very efficient gas furnace and they're not ready to convert to electrified HVAC. So we'll note that in our software and make sure that we connect with them in 5 to 10 years when it's more appropriate and cost effective for them to consider a retrofit. We look at what impacts can be so we can find the right partners to maximize carbon reductions and ensure that the underlying infrastructure can keep up with the changes that we're implementing on a project by project basis. The same data that we use to provide city scale analysis of buildings can be used to better engage customers and streamline their experiences with BlocPower, with the Electrified Ithaca program, or with any program where BlocPower works. It provides instant building report recommendations for an individual property owner to understand what their retrofit prediction would be, what types of technologies they may want to engage in, and what it might cost. Beyond Ithaca, our ability to process and analyze data through our software is something that helps us scale our programs. And it serves policymakers and program designers and building owners in any city interested in working with us. Another tool.
Ariel, we're at the 5-minute mark.
Thanks so much. Another tool, and Luis spoke about this need, another scaling issue in this infrastructure transition is workforce. And I'm sure many of you on the call understand this. In Ithaca, BlocPower will be working with the city on the Green Jobs Corridor that Luis mentioned. We'll be employing many of the participants who get trained through the state programs. We've been committed to workforce development since our inception, and we see this transition, we see an added opportunity of the green energy transition as a chance to engage people from disinvested communities who have historically been excluded from high road jobs pathways. One example of this is our program in New York City, the Civilian Climate Corps. We have been tasked from the city of New York, the New York City's Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, to train over 1,000 workers from communities that have been overlooked. The majority of the funds go directly to participants for a 6-month paid training and apprenticeship. Participants in this program have installed Wi-Fi in public housing. They've installed electric vehicle charging stations and solar on roofs. They've trained and worked on HVAC conversions and in air quality monitoring. It's been very successful. You can see here our CEO and founder, Donnell Baird, and one of the participants, Joshua Krupa, speaking with Vice President Harris and DOE Secretary Granholm about the program. And we're really proud of it. And we see the workforce development as a key scaling issue for the energy transition in any and every community in the United States. So BlocPower works to deliver programs to meet cities' needs. Challenges local governments face, and Ithaca has some of these, but is addressing them in different ways, are that buildings in the US are inefficient, unhealthy, and in need of upgrades. Cities have ambitious greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets that really require engaging with existing buildings. Many cities are starting with new building codes, which is a great place to start, but it isn't enough with the replacement rate of buildings. Retrofits have been historically inaccessible to low and moderate income communities. There's a lot of unemployment, underemployment, and neighborhoods and families lack access to high-speed internet. So BlocPower provides solutions to all of these through our software, through our community engagement, through our workforce development, and our community mesh Wi-Fi. Finally, BlocPower works with cities in a lot of different ways. For electrification, we can start with a pilot, we can start with our software, or we can go to full-scale program. With Luis, as he mentioned early in the call, this is an iterative program. We're going to find ways forward. We're going to find ways to work together with the community, with a lot of stakeholders. He showed you that slide of all the different partners on the program that we're thrilled to work with as the program manager. And what we're looking to do in other communities as Ithaca paves the way, as Luis mentioned, is to bring it other places. We know that Ithaca is going to show us a lot of lessons learned that are transferable, but some of the lessons are just local to any given environment and to the community in which these efforts need to be delivered. So we're really excited to communicate with anyone who wants to. If you're interested in learning more about how your community can work with BlocPower, Claire and I are here to talk about it, but we're also really excited to have the Q&A and talk about the Ithaca Green New Deal and learn more from Luis. So thank you all very much. Appreciate the time.
Thank you so much, Luis and Ariel. Your presentations have been so inspiring and have stimulated a lot of questions. I am Andra Rose. I am another board member of Local Energy Advocates, and I will be asking the questions that people have submitted. If you have other, if you want to submit more questions now, please do. But before we start, I want to welcome some of the esteemed elected officials who have joined us on this webinar. Senator Mark Pacheco, thank you for joining us. We have former governor candidate Bob Massey here. Thank you. There are Amherst Town Councilors Jennifer Taub and Dorothy Pam, and Northampton City Councilors Alex Jarrett and Stan Moulton, a Cambridge City Councilor Quentin Zondervan, and I'm sorry if we missed any other elected officials. I also want to recognize that we have a number of staff people from our local towns, and I'm sure other towns, members of sustainability and energy committees, and many leaders of Massachusetts organizations joining us here. Been very exciting. So just remember, if you have questions, to send them to questions Adele, and they will be added to the list. So I will start with, could you please explain the leasing option with no upfront costs? Who is the initial funding source?
Sure, I'll take this. Thanks so much for the question. BlocPower's lease is backed through investments from Goldman Sachs, Microsoft's Climate Fund, Inclusive Prosperity Capital, some crowdfunding. That's where we have our initial set of money. We're also in phase 3 of a DOE loan program office application to secure $1 billion in low-cost capital to deploy for underwriting these leases. So the upfront cost is paid by BlocPower, backed by our capital providers, and we recover the lease payments over the life of the lease, which is 12 to 15 years, which is the operating life of our appliances. And that's how it works. I hope that covers the questions.
So these private funds underwrite, so it's underwritten by private capital.
We have backing, yeah, we have investments, we have debt capital provided to BlocPower that we deploy in these lease models. So we are able to pay them back over time, and we recover the payment from the property owner over time as well.
Thank you. And so how do the loans and leases get repaid?
Through a monthly lease payment, just sort of like a no upfront cost car lease, similar to that. So you'll pay a monthly payment. What we look to do is match the payment to the projected energy savings. Although BlocPower is able to underwrite health and safety measures, which don't capture savings, of course. And so we're not able always to match the lease payment to the projected utility bill savings, but often we are.
Great. So here's another. What are the biggest barriers or challenges to convince skeptics to support the implementation of the plan?
Do you want me to take this one?
Please.
God, there are so many. The concept of not in my backyard, goes to the next level when you are talking about messing with people's houses, especially during COVID when people are working from home or they have the kids at home. It's just a very complicated thing. So a lot of the time, it's all about talking about the benefits, and the benefits extend beyond your own house. It goes for, the infrastructure that will feed the entire neighborhood. And it just helps, create community wealth. And so a lot of the time is about, making sure that people understand the benefits and how the benefits extend beyond the person. So in general, it's that, it's a personal take. A lot of the time is based on principle. We have people saying, I'm not going to take private money because I don't know where that money comes from. And a lot of the time they just don't trust you because you are the government. And so, it is a combination of things, but the truth is, and I think Ariel, highlighted all of these elements, there are clear benefits, beyond climate. You cannot believe in climate change and still be in favor of this program because, of air quality, because of, once again, community wealth, because of a number of things. But yeah, I mean, in general, we're going to find people that just don't like these and don't believe in these. And it's just about talking to them.
Ariel or Claire, did you want to add anything from other settings that you've run into?
I think what I'll say is there's so much to be done that I don't really think that it's our job to focus on them at first. I think that serving the needs of the people who are ready to engage with this program is more than enough work to start. And once the benefits start to accrue, people will naturally be drawn to it, and naysayers will be proven wrong oftentimes. And I think that that's a fine way to approach a lot of this. Similarly to knowing that not every building is going to be able to be appropriate for a retrofit right up at front. And that's part of the reason why there are naysayers. Well, there's a lot of buildings that are, and let's start with those, and then let's iterate from there. There's so much to be done that it's not worth trying to find perfection. I think that the saying is, don't let perfection be the enemy of the good. And I really believe that here as well. Not that anybody who's a naysayer is an enemy, but just to be clear, I think just getting started is really important.
So with electricity prices going up quickly right now in the Northeast, so how do you make the cost benefit analysis? How's that changing the cost benefit analysis of using electric heat pumps instead of gas? Is that challenging the model?
I'll take a first stab at this, and Luis, if you'd like to follow up, I'd welcome that. Yeah, I think the reality is anyone who says they know what's going to come is not being honest with themselves. And utility prices have always been variable. And one of the things that we can predict is that they'll go up on both fronts. And we know that the externalized costs of gas and oil are enormous. And just because nobody's explicitly paying for them with their bill, we're all paying for them. We know that gas is in many locations cheaper than electricity already. And so that's one of the reasons why it doesn't make a lot of sense to focus initially with the technologies and prices and incentive packages that we have right now on a full-scale press on gas conversions. So we look at the ones where the low-hanging fruit exists around oil conversions and propane, electric resistance heat, and the people who are champions and willing to pay a little bit more for their conversion from natural gas. And then knowing that technologies are going to get better, technologies, maybe not better, they're going to get cheaper. And our incentive packages are going to get better, and all of that will drive the upfront costs down. And then we're pretty sure that gas prices are going to go up. There's going to be a lot of changes on that front, and we see that happening. And just because it's not happening in the immediate term, volatility doesn't mean that it's not the likelihood. And again, I know I can't say everyone who predicts the future shouldn't predict the future necessarily, but I think that's one that we're all pretty aligned on. And so we're looking at that as a long-term trajectory. And so it will make sense in the long term, even though there's volatility right now in the short term. Luis?
Oh, and exactly that, what you said. But the other thing is, rates, electricity rates, the way they are calculated and created today, it has to change. We need to have a demand-based rate. And if you do that, then the numbers start getting just much, much closer. I mean, right now, with the current cost of electricity and natural gas and everything, the numbers work for multifamily, the numbers work for commercial, for industrial. They almost work for single family or natural gas. But if you change the electricity rates to demand-based, then, then we have a competition. And then finally, you can have people thinking, okay, the right thing to do is this. So, but I think, I agree with Ariel, we're going to start with whoever wants to play. We're not going to beg anybody. We don't have time for that. We're going to work with those who want to play, those who see an opportunity, and eventually we'll let people come on board.
Thank you. I just want to remind people, if they have questions, you need to send it to in chat to questions, Adele. We're not taking questions by raising hands. Okay, so what incentive is there for owners of rental properties to participate? We have a lot of rental properties in our area.
Ithaca has an enormous number of rental properties. It's one of the highest, definitely in New York State. Luis, you can speak to the actual numbers. It's complicated in that split incentive is real. It improves the health of the home. It improves the value of the home. It reduces renter turnover. So there's a few issues right there that are upfront. I think there's some incentives to be captured if a property owner has to replace their equipment anyway, and they can reduce the upfront costs and secure upgrades and higher quality value and net operating income of their home. I think those are all positives from a property owner point of view. Luis, can you speak a little bit about the specifics in Ithaca?
Yeah, we have 70% rentals in the city. And then we have a very funny thing because, out of the 70%, about a third don't live in the city. And of those, half of them don't live in the United States. So it's a very funny thing to try to find the building owner to negotiate with them. A lot of the time you have the tenant who's completely on board, and a lot of the time you have the building owner who's on board. But when you cannot find either of them because there are students and they're on a spring break, and at the same time the owner lives in Thailand, then it gets complicated. So once again, you use the approach to, I'll get whatever I can. In general, the city needs to do a bit more. For example, right now we're working on a tax abatement for building owners. So as long as they participate in the program, they commit to not increase the rent beyond inflation every year, and they benefit from a tax abatement that prevents the tax bill from going up for a period of time. So you are trying to address the needs of both, but you need to make sure that the benefits are passed on to the tenant, because a lot of the time the gas bill is paid by the owner and the electricity bill is paid by the tenant. So if you were to do this, then there's no gas bill, and then suddenly the tenant pays more. So you need to make sure that the building owner is taking on that, and therefore having a reduction probably on the electricity bill too. So it gets complicated, but it's a lot of fun too.
And what about the temporary displacement of tenants while work is being done?
We typically work to not displace tenants while work is being done. We do have to enter units and homes in order to complete most of our retrofits, although there is some novel technology out of the Netherlands, which is looking for avoiding that. which is really exciting, and that Luis is working with the state of New York to bring to Ithaca. But in general, it may interrupt the tenants, but we don't look to displace them. We have our retrofits down to just a couple days. And while that requires us to be in and out of some of the living spaces, we work with our construction partners on the ground to minimize disruption and minimize disruption to any residents or occupants of buildings that we're working on.
And here I want to add something, because this is important. It has to be said. When we were having conversations with BlocPower, they know what they're doing. They know it very well. And this was one of the questions that we had for them. How about displacement? Because we had an affordable housing building where we were doing retrofitting in the city before this program started, and we had to put people in hotels for about 3 months. And it was a complicated matter, and it was very expensive. But talking to BlocPower, we understood. We were not happy with the answer. Oh, don't worry, we will not displace them. They were able to explain why not and how this would be implemented. And then we started interviewing other companies, and not everybody was able to answer in the same way. And it's very difficult. And Ariel was talking about how fragmented the industry is and how problematic that is. So having a program manager, having a single company trying to establish a standard way of doing retrofitting or electrification is really important. I really think that if you're going to take on this in your communities, you need to think about it that way, because otherwise you're going to have different ways of doing things, and the whole thing at the end of the day goes against the program that you're trying to implement.
So this is a question for Ariel or Claire. So we can see how private entities can lease from BlocPower. Do you work with the municipalities themselves with complex, larger buildings like schools?
Claire can speak to the affordable housing complex relationships. From a mush market perspective, we absolutely can work with cities. We do a lot of work with schools and houses of worship. And that's one of the first building type channels that we established our work with. We actually see schools and houses of worship as stakeholders that are really important to engage with, both because of the benefits that accrue to entire communities and children from improved indoor air quality and comfort, but also because it touches so many stakeholders in a community, and they can understand the benefits of the technology and experience it themselves, and then speak to the realities of it. I think a lot of us on the call know about cold climate air source heat pumps and understand them, but not everyone that is in the general market does. And so having people be able to understand that electric space heating is possible for reduced rates is really powerful. And so that's one of the reasons we work with churches, communities of faith, and schools. Claire, is there anything you want to talk about the complex buildings that we do and how we approach that?
Yeah, I'll just mention my background is in affordable housing. I'm a chair of a local public housing authority in my town, and in Massachusetts, the town of Brookline, for example, has their public housing authority has engaged in really interesting electrification initiatives in some of their developments. And there are inflection points in affordable housing in capital expenditures where there are really great opportunities to initiate electrification solutions, also in low-income housing tax credit properties at the end of the 15-year period of the tax credit. So I think there's a lot of planning and foresight that can go into, when is, as Ariel had mentioned before, when is the right time to kind of initiate an electrification effort as it relates to capital expenditures in your affordable housing portfolio.
Thank you. So can you describe in more detail the Community Advisory Board? Will board members receive stipends? And how are they selected?
Thanks. Yeah, we oftentimes create community advisory boards in phases. So an initial cohort of community advisory board members are selected based on a variety of factors. We speak with individuals who are interested. We've solicited applicants. We've also met with people in Ithaca and remotely. We've been recommended through our outreach to speak with other people. And so it's a lot of word of mouth. We've of course spoken with Luis and his colleagues in the city to get feedback on who an initial cohort of community stakeholders and leaders could be to provide introductions and host events, and who will evangelize for the program and who will take risks to work on the program, work with the program, perhaps as property owners themselves, who can then answer questions for other local interested property owners and residents, because that's really important. We can speak about it in theory all day, but really implementing it and then having people experience it and speak about it themselves is much more powerful. And it provides a real flywheel effect. Word of mouth marketing is more powerful than any other marketing on earth. And it is so important for us to get those champions in the door. And so the initial cohort of community advisory board members are a mix of stakeholders who are committed to the issue from an equity lens, from an environmental lens, who have access to property owners or groups of advocates and activists who will commit to speaking with property owners about the issue. We oftentimes do pay stipends. I'm actually not involved in this community advisory board, so I don't know what the commitment is, but I hope we are, because I think it is an equity issue and we absolutely need to address participation in these types of extracurricular activities and make them accessible to everyone, so that we ensure that through stipends. So I'm pretty sure we are. Yeah.
Thank you. So Luis, in Ithaca, will the Community Advisory Board be an official town, city entity? And if so, did they get appointed?
No. The advisory board is something that BlocPower has a lot of experience working with, and I think they understand very well that the type of people that they need to reach out to. We obviously provide advice, and we I am a very opinionated person. Ariel knows that, but in general, we're all trying to do the same thing, and I think we concede that as government, we really need to limit the amount of involvement when we are not experts on something. So we are really doing our best to not get in the way of progress and be helpful where we can. So the advisory board is entirely a BlocPower thing. We just help putting it together.
So we're curious whether Ithaca streamlined your permitting ordinance process for the project.
No, and it's complicated because we understand what it is, and every town in America that is not called New York City, Chicago, or Atlanta, or Los Angeles, has the same issue. The building department is not huge. You don't have that many building inspectors. You don't have that many code enforcers, and it's very, very difficult to do this at scale, because right now, for example, in the city of Ithaca, we have 2 building inspectors. They're struggling with the regular development that we have in the city. Now add that, at some point we're going to be doing 500 buildings a month, then, it presents a problem. And also post-COVID, it's also different because, the building department continued to work every single day. So they obviously had enough, a few people left. And this is the same problem that we're going to find everywhere. And we have been addressing this, and we're all trying to find a solution for that. Technology is an element, but I think there are other processes at the state level and at the federal level that need to be streamlined before we can solve this.
So will you be emphasizing on-site solar, going for net zero on buildings, rooftops, parking lots, and why or why not?
You want to go, Ariel? You want me to do?
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I mean, part of the program is, it's part of a larger scheme to really decarbonize the entire city. And as I mentioned, some of it comes from buildings, but there are very clear economic benefits of co-deployment of heat pumps and solar technology, or solar technology and EV charging infrastructure, or heat pumps and EV charging. So when you look at all of those connections and you think about a program at scale, where the intention is to create economies of scale, we always say that they're horizontal and vertical. So you need to go across technologies, you need to go in the entire city. So rooftop solar is essential for this to work, because we need to reduce the amount of energy that we import from the grid. So we need to make sure that, most of the rooftops that are available have access to solar technology in an affordable way, so they can participate in this and also reduce the amount of electricity that they pay for. So yeah, 100% we're trying to do that. We are working with BlocPower because they are the ones providing most of the financing for this. So it has to work, it has to be part of the calculation.
Another question for you, Luis. Can you describe the contract between Ithaca and BlocPower, the cost that the city of Ithaca has to pay?
I can't, not yet. But what I can tell you is that the RFP was very clear in terms of what the city needed, and BlocPower went beyond what the RFP was. And because, and this is when we realized that there was a need for a different type of partnership, because we were not looking for somebody that would meet every single requirement in the RFP. We were looking for somebody who could even tell us, your RFP sucks, the reality is this, and we need to do this. And BlocPower answered, like, we can do all that you want, but we can also do all of these things. So that actually informed the process in which, and it's funny because we announced this in November and we have taken this long to finalize the contract. But the reality is that we learned a lot from the interaction with BlocPower. And we had to, one of the hardest things for government officials, a local government, is to forget about your ego, and realize that there's people who do this for a living. So you don't have to know everything. You need to just pay attention, learn as much as you can, and let them lead you. Obviously, you need to develop a relationship of trust. So now that we had trust, after November, we met in December, we developed the trust that we needed. Then we started negotiations, and now we understand the type of contract that we have. So if you go to the RFP, which is publicly available, we're doing all of that. But we are doing extra things to make sure that we guarantee equity, financial inclusion for everybody. We're also making sure that we take advantage of, as I mentioned, the co-deployment of some technologies. And the city and BlocPower will enter also into a financial agreement that I cannot disclose yet, but at some point it's going to become available, and people could request it.
So that's, you gave some good advice there. If another community wanted to start this type of program, how would you advise them to start?
Well, I think, I don't know if any government in the US has somebody in the staff that can understand technology, policy, finance, community well-building, is an expert in community engagement, because if they do, that's fantastic. But the reality is that, as far as I know, nobody has it, including Ithaca. So you need to, surround yourself by experts, people that know this, that do this for a living. There are a number of companies doing this. We believe that BlocPower is the best suited to do this in Ithaca, but you will find a lot of experts, that can provide advice. So, some towns we have seen that they have issued, requests for information before they have an RFP. Some of them have, hired consultants. But the truth is, first, you need to make sure that you can commit to a program that is going to transform entirely your economy, your infrastructure, and it's going to make things different just by virtue of making them even, and fair. So that is the first level of commitment that needs to exist at the city council level, at the mayor level, or town administrator level. Once you have that, then you need to think about the implications. And if you don't know them, you need to inform yourself and then learn about that. And then you need to think about, you can structure a program like this. And at that moment, that's when you engage the block powers. That's when you engage them, because they know better how to structure something like this. And they can tell you, because for example, I wanted this to be done in 5 years, and BlocPower was like, yeah, it's more like 12. So we eventually understood why it needed to be more time than what we thought. So I think I would advise, for people to follow that. Identify the real commitment that you can back, and then eventually, start the process, and at some point rely on experts for this.
I'll just add to that just briefly. I think that's a great description, Luis. BlocPower really started as an organization that is entrenched and focused on community organizing. And I see that in the participants in this group today, there are a lot of community-based organizations and representatives from Mothers Out Front and from different faith organizations. And Ariel and I have, each of us met with different climate action committees in Massachusetts from different towns and around the country. And that type of local level setting and local initiative really is one of the best ways for communities to set their priorities and to define their mission, which is very much in line with BlocPower's vision of community relationships as the way of defining your mission and going forward in executing your mission, very much based on community organizing principles of relationship-driven outcomes of trust as well.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to add, because I think what Claire said is very, very important, and I don't want people to miss the point. The truth is, we identified that without agency and trust, this is not going to work. The community needs to be part of the solution, need to be part of the implementation of the solution. And there has to be a new sense of trust, and that takes time. It has to be built. But once you have it, then we're talking. Then we're going to have something that can work.
Thank you so much. You're really speaking our language. And thank you, Claire, for bringing up the community members who are here tonight. I wanted to let people know that we're going to open up the chat. We know that people have a lot of resources you could share with each other, perhaps an event that you want to let people know about, direct chat to a friend you see across the way. And so we're opening the chat now so that you can make your add to the conversation that way. Include links if you like to documents that you think are really useful to others. So we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. I think I will go to some of the larger issue in Massachusetts. Our electricity is still very heavily fossil fuel generated. A very fast transition to electrification might not mean the same thing as it does in New York. Can you just address that? And BlocPower, could you could talk about also in other states.
I think Luis's thoughtfulness and approach to all of this, I want to give him time to speak to this as well. But BlocPower talks about turning buildings into Teslas or into, akin to the electric vehicle conversion. And there may be many people on this call who have EVs, but they know that they're charging it with electricity that's still fossil fuel generated. And so it's not perfect, right? I think there's a lot of pieces in this transition that need to be addressed. And BlocPower is focused on that last mile conversion, that building electrification and decarbonization. The reality is that there are really complicated issues at play around decarbonizing the grid. I think we all were hoping for a clean energy performance standard, and hopefully that'll still come back. I think there's a lot that can be done around CCAs. I think there's a lot that can be done around community organizing around community solar, and those types of things, so that you don't feel disempowered when looking at investor-owned utilities and their slower plans to decarbonize, and knowing that pushing on those investor-owned utilities is a great investment of time, as well as engaging with municipal light plant providers. Luis, you've thought a lot about the grid as well. I don't want to put you on the spot, but
the grid is a pain, man. It really is. For really to achieve full decarbonization, of course, we need to change the way we generate electricity. So you can think about it, you generate, the transmission line, the substation, the distribution, the electrical panel, and the appliances. So now let's start in reverse. BlocPower is helping with that last mile, with the appliances, it's changing everything that we need. And then it's changing to also the electrical panel, and that goes to the little wire that connects to the pole. And that's it. That's as far as we go, because then it's for the utility to change that little wire, to change the transformer, the distribution infrastructure, and the substations. But what is it that you can do in that particular domain? You can deploy more solar, you can deploy energy storage. And when you think about solar, you can find ground-mounted solar, distributed community solar, you can have rooftop solar. And then you need to think strategically about on-site storage, which could be for residential and commercial, or as a no-wires alternative. So you can actually defer investment in the distribution grid. At the same time, there are opportunities to do community choice aggregation that would allow you to procure 100% renewable energy. And there are new frameworks that, for example, we're working on, which is the 24/7 carbon-free electricity framework, which is not only about getting RECs and procuring electricity, it's about a time-stamped kilowatt hour that is produced from a clean source at the same time that it's consumed in the city of Ithaca. And that requires a lot more than just procuring RECs, but it is something that we're working with at least 5 different companies right now. But all of this goes to that part, that domain. Then you go back to the transmission side, you go back to the generation side, and then things need to change. So a clean electricity standard is absolutely necessary. We're gonna get there eventually. But I think the key to this whole thing, at least for me, is don't think about it in isolation. All of this is part of a giant puzzle that we need to assemble all together at the end.
Thank you so much. We have reached the end of our webinar. I feel like we could go on for quite a long time asking the rest of the questions. Perhaps we could consolidate them and send them to you and distribute your answers after we're done here, if you're willing. And I just really grateful to all of you for inspiring us to do some very bold work like you're doing. I want to also thank Climate Action Now for sharing your Zoom and your fabulous tech team, Irving, Naya, and Carol. Also want to thank Adele Franks, my fellow Leah board member, and Russ Vernon Jones, who are behind the scenes collecting and sorting questions. And now